Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours with Rod McDermott, founder and CEO of Project Activate and CEO of McDermott and Bull Executive Search, one of the nation's top executive recruiting organizations with offices throughout the US, Canada, and Europe. Office Hours is a live video series where we answer your most challenging questions about landing a job or pursuing your dream job and overall career advice. I'm your co-host, Kristen Farrenfort, and today's topic is how to answer the question, what are your weaknesses? So today, what a great topic. I mean, it really goes with our last episode of how to make a great first impression. Both tough topics for those who are interviewing. So just to remind everyone, it is 10 o'clock, but we have about 30 minutes. Each session is 30 minutes. So please send in your questions. First come, first serve. Rod, let me start it off here. When we talk about weaknesses, do we actually point out our weaknesses?
Yeah. Hey, Kristen. Thank you. Great to see you. Great to see everybody. I will apologize in advance. We're actually on spring break, and the place I'm at, the Wi-Fi is not all that great. So it's a little spotty. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. But I will tell you this. So, and by the way, I want to reiterate, send your questions through the chat because we're going to go ahead and answer them as they come through. We commit to spend at least 50% of our time asking your live questions, whether they relate to the topic or not, whatever challenges you're having in job search, in interviewing, landing your dream job, any of the above, we want to answer. Can you hear me okay, Kristen?
Yeah, I can. Sounds good.
Okay, good. Awesome. Okay. So back to the weakness thing. I believe if we hit these weaknesses on their head, it's a strength, right? So one of the things I'm a big believer in, I have this saying, everybody knows everything, right? And we know it's not true. But if you assume that, right? And then you start mitigating that, right? So my weakness is X. Let me assume they're going to find out. Let me assume they're going to know. Somebody from my former company, my current company, whatever, and be able to find things out. What if I address them? Then I at least show that I'm aware of them, and I can actually talk about mitigators, right? I know we had some questions that you sent me over the weekend, Kristen, from some of our viewers that actually spoke to that, right? That actually spoke to, I know what my weaknesses are, and let me tell you how I do what I do and mitigate those weaknesses so that I can perform at a high level for the company. So I'm a big believer in getting really clear. In fact, I'd even tell you to go a step further. Talk to former bosses. If you're not sure what your perceived weaknesses are, talk to former coworkers, talk to former bosses. I can tell you mine, Kristen, you and I have worked together a long time. You know a lot of mine. Yeah. And if I come clean with those and I come clean with how I'm managing those, then somebody's like, okay, we know what we're going to get.
Right. Has anyone asked you, any former employees asked you, hey, what are my weaknesses? Or how can I be better? Has anyone kind of posed that question?
Not all that often. It's interesting. I think we have egos that try to protect us, right? And so we want to assume that we know everything and that somebody else can't teach us something. But if somebody were to come up and say, hey, I want to, like a current employee, let's say, right. I want to take my career from here to here, and I want to know what you think, what you perceive are some of my weaknesses, some of the things that might stop me from being able to do that, because I want to start working on them now. We did this, Kristen, you know about this. We did an interview series last week with some Project Activate graduates in different parts of the country. And I was talking to one of the folks that we interviewed in Arizona, and he's got designs on management. He came out of management in his old job. He wanted to totally shift industries, got into a sales role in technology. Very, very happy, was stuck for a couple of years trying to transition out of retail consumer into technology, B2B technology, and came through Project Activate. We were able to help him get online and land this job. So he's doing great, but he has designs on management down the road. And I said, listen, I know you're new with the company, but let it be known that that's where you want to go and that you are open to being coached. You're open to learning, right? Because most people don't do that. They don't come to their bosses and say, listen, here's where I'm at. Here's where my goal is. I just want to make you aware of it so that as you think of me over the next couple of years, what are the things I need to do to get to that point? Now, I want to go back to the weakness thing in interviews because I think we just got a question. Do you want to read that question, Christian?
Yeah, we got one from
Can you see
Joanne.
it,
Yeah,
Kristen?
Joanne asked, should these
Yeah.
weaknesses relate to the current position that you're applying for?
So when somebody, it really depends on how the question is asked, but I think go all in, Joanne. So if somebody says, hey, tell me about some of your weaknesses, say, okay, let me share with you a couple things that I've been working on, right? So let's say you asked me, Kristen, you're interviewing me.
Yeah.
Go
Hey,
ahead.
Rod, tell me a little bit about your weaknesses.
All right. I try to think one or two steps ahead. So sometimes I go pretty fast, right? And so I have this new saying in my head that I try to, when somebody's trying to tell me something, don't try to finish their sentence. Don't try to go to the solution already. This also helps, by the way, in personal relationships with my wife. You've heard me talk about this. Um, Seek first to understand, right? That's the saying I tell myself, seek first to understand. And it's unbelievable how often what's really going on is a little different, sometimes dramatically different than what I think is happening. So here I'm going to solve for this thing over here that I perceive is going on because I've heard half the story and I don't need to hear any more. I know the solution, and it's really this. And so I've tried to, I think somebody told me this is the Socratic method. I've tried to actually ask more questions these days. So when somebody says something, I've tried to, when I'm at my best, which is like 8% of the time, that's another weakness. I've tried to say, tell me more. Tell me what else is going on. When that happens, what else is happening, right? And if I can get people talking about things. So as a leader, I want my people stepping up. I want them feeling very comfortable making mistakes because I know failure is the best teacher. I don't want to rob them of that experience. Um, but I also want to help guide a little bit, right? So I can be very directive. You've seen that from me before. I can also be very, very short, like hit and run, here's the answer, do this. Hey, we need this done. Just go do this. And they're like, whoa, I've been going in this direction for the last 2 weeks and now we're changing direction. And so I've had a coach actually tell me before, it's like you're driving this bus and you pull up to the bus stop and there's all these people, 60 people at McDermott and Bull that want to get on the bus, but you actually stop for a split second, open the door, nobody's quite ready to get on and you're off. And I'm like, okay, that's a good visual. I'm alone. That's not good. So those are my weaknesses, right? But what I could tell somebody if I'm interviewing for a leadership role is I say, here's some things that I'm doing about it. I've got coaching that I'm working with. It's the number one thing I'm working with because I'd like to become a level 5 leader at some point. I want to become a leader that people want to follow. And so I want to focus on inspiring through a vision and letting other people figure out, the leaders that I'm leading, figure out how to get there, right? And so I'm not robbing them of the opportunity of constructing a solution, right? So that's how I used to lead. I'd be, oh, here's the answer. Go do this.
So that's interesting. So the way you're posing it is, these are my weaknesses, but these are the solutions to my weaknesses. And what I found in self-reflection, either through a coach or just knowing like, hey, this is what I know this is gonna come up. This is through leadership. This is through employees that I work with. This is how I work. But how I can fix that is through XYZ. We had some questions come in. Gert, here we go. Should you proactively address weaknesses in interviews, especially when trying to change industry?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly the time that you do it. And by the way, you want to tell a story. Somebody sent a note, and I'm sure we'll get through these questions in a few, but somebody sent a question over the weekend, even about using kind of failure in a prior industry. And one of the things I'm a big believer in is we can not do our best work if we're in the wrong place. I call it the square peg, round hole syndrome, right?
Right.
The the round hole might be the company, you might be the square peg. If you're in the wrong company or the wrong industry, you're not going to do your best work.
Right.
And so if you can address that, and whether that's called a weakness or whatever, and just say, listen, I'm looking to change industries because this is kind of the way I am. And I'm working on these things, but I think my way lends itself really well to this other role over here, right? For instance, there was that question this weekend, Kristen, about from somebody who's a little more analytical.
Right.
Did you read it? Questions while I was out?
Yeah, I had some questions coming in. So this one kind of talked about, what if my weaknesses is working with teams? People wouldn't consider me a personable guy, and I've been calling out for being too harsh on my team that I manage. If they called my previous employer, not sure they would say great things about me. How do I go about highlighting that I'm great at my job, but I'm not the person to manage people?
Right. See, this is a perfect thing. So self-awareness is something that is a strength. So when you talk about your weaknesses, but you talk about it in a way that you were aware of it and that you are A, working on it and trying to improve it so it doesn't hurt you, and B, also trying to put yourself in a position where you're playing to your strengths and not your weaknesses.
Right.
For instance, this person could be great at getting things done in more of a individual contributor role. Maybe they're a great analyst, right? Maybe they're just somebody who loves to pour over numbers, but as soon as you put them in a leadership role, they're just not great at creating followership, and people tend to leave and people tend to feel not engaged with the company because they're their boss. Well, you want to keep this person, but you want to keep them in the right role, right? And for this person's sake, in their own career, they have to recognize this. So what I would say to all the people that are on this call is think about your strengths and also think about your weaknesses. And if you had to figure out how to play to your strengths and how to put your weaknesses in a box so they didn't hurt you, what would that look like? And then how could you convey that? And this is the thing, I go back to what I said at the very beginning. Everybody knows everything, right? Assume whoever you're interviewing with is going to call your prior employers, right? So just like this person said, if they called my previous employer, not sure that they would say great things about me, lean in, man, hit it, get it head on, and make sure you say, hey, this is where I didn't do all that great. And I think my rep in that company is going to be one of, kind of a autocratic, not empathetic, too fast, not bringing people along kind of leader. But here's how I'm fixing that.
It's awesome. And Rob, actually, along those same lines, Rob mentioned, even if I explain my weaknesses and what I do about them to the interviewer, wouldn't that make them question whether or not wouldn't make them question whether or not I have the capability to carry out the duties of the position?
Yeah, I think, Rob, that's a great point. And the answer might be yes, depending on the position. Listen, I should not be applying for jobs as a chief surgeon at a hospital, right? Not qualified, wouldn't be great at it, blah, blah, blah. I know that's an extreme example, but the point I'm trying to make, Rob, is if you are applying for things that are playing to your strengths and being able to convey that in an interview and not be ashamed or not be trying to hide, have your ego protect you on your weaknesses, whoever you're talking to, they have weaknesses too. They'll probably get it. And the fact that you're so honest and open, there's I don't know if you've heard of this, Kristen, before, this term called radical honesty. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. We actually practice it. I think you're actually really great at it as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big believer in it because everybody knows everything, right? So just lay your cards on the table, keep your ego checked at the door, right? And then talk to them about it. I will tell you guys, listen, I've been doing executive search for over 20 years. I've interviewed thousands of people. The number one thing that trips up candidates when they get hired at a company is 90 days in, I get a phone call from the company saying, this just happened, or, yeah, they're not really who we thought they were, right? Be transparent through the interview process. It's the thing that makes people most concerned. And if you're getting tripped up in the interview process and not getting hired, part of it might be, especially if you're getting interviews, If you're getting interviews, but you're not landing the job, part of it might be that they feel that there's something to your story, but they just can't put their finger on it. Don't make them do this treasure hunt to figure out who you really are. Be totally transparent. Hey guys, I'm going to tell you everything. It's one of the things we do, Kristen, you know this, at McDermott Bull when we hire, we want every new potential employee to speak to whoever they want, right? And I'm an open book, and I'll say, listen, you should speak to people in your job. You should speak to these other people. And I'm going to tell them, give it to you straight, because in 90 days, you're going to find out the truth about our place. You're going to find out, I can sit here and tell you all the great things about it and what I think are fantastic and how we're terrific and all these other things. And I do believe that, but you got to learn it or hear it from people that are in the job, that are doing it day to day. And I don't want them to sugarcoat anything, because that doesn't serve you or me.
People love that. And David actually had a really great point here. David mentioned that Radical Candor is actually a book. So if you wanted to look into books about what it looks like to have that kind of radical transparency, David mentioned Radical Candor. Hardy actually had a really great point here. Do you like the idea of doing a personal SWOT analysis in advance as part of identifying your weaknesses?
Oh, I think that's really cool. If you do it along with what I'm doing about it, right? So here's my SWOT. Everybody knows what that, right? Strength, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, right? So where we all want to go is we all want to go to the weaknesses and the threats, right? But the reality is, if we just play to our strengths and opportunities and put the others in a box, we're good to go. But in an interview situation, Hardy, here's what I would do. I would make sure that you do talk about how you're mitigating any of those weaknesses that you have, right? I would make sure that you say, here's some challenges that I've had in my career. Here's some of the things that I think I do better than almost anybody, okay? And here's the results I've been able to achieve. And you can talk to my bosses about it. But here's how I'm trying to set myself up for success, right? I'm getting coaching. I've engaged a coach on my own. People are going to love that. I mean, one of those things that, well, I'll tell you, the number one reason why people succeed or fail in a company is culture fit. And the number one thing around culture fit is ability to work with other people at that company. And if you are solving some of those problems that might be tripping you up, they're going to love that. The self-awareness thing, as I said, is really, really key. So I think it really differentiates you from other candidates. I'm not saying it's going to work 100% of the time, but I think it's going to work most of the time. And I think the times it doesn't work, that company probably, it wouldn't have worked out anyway. So if you try this at a company and you don't get the job, you might not have gotten the job anyway. But I do believe that the more often you come across honest and transparent, and they say, I don't think there's anything about this guy or gal that we don't know through this interview process, you're more likely to get the nod if you're qualified for the job and you position as such. I mean, we had a question, I think, over the weekend. Let's see, where is the one about organization? Didn't we have a question about organization?
Yeah, so this one had mentioned, we got a question that said, I'm scared to let them know I'm not as detail oriented as most employers would like to hear. How do I go about telling them that's my weakness, but also get the job done? So a little tough, because everyone wants to hear that you're detail oriented.
Well, yes and no, right? So for me, it depends on the role, right? Sure. If there's some role, there are some roles that I want you to absolutely, my admin, my office manager. I mean, there's 1,000, well, you know, Kristen, you were in that role like 18 years ago.
Right.
Not really, you're not that old. But you know, how many moving parts do I have in my day?
About 80.
Yeah. You know, hey, I'm going here Tuesday. Then I fly out Tuesday afternoon. I'm going here. I need rental cars in both places. I need a hotel over here. I need 3 rooms over here, 2 doubles, 1 single, blah, 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 right? And there's a lot. And you can't kind of screw things up where I show up and there's no hotels, no rental cars, none of that. So for that role, I need detail oriented. So if you were applying for a job like that, not going to be the right thing. And again, this is also knowing your strengths, playing to your strengths, right? But I think if you mitigate that by saying, here's the roles I've determined aren't really great for me. Here's the roles I've determined are. And that's why I'm applying for this role with your company today, because I think while I'm not as detail oriented, it's not as big a deal because on the business development side, I've supported myself in the past by having a researcher and a right-hand person gather all the data, but I am better than just about anybody I've ever seen engaging cold prospects to talk to us. So if we're looking at adding 100 million in revenue through strategic partnerships and alliances and new customer acquisition, I'm great at opening those doors. Most people say I'm better than most people at opening those doors. But if you want me to do the research on, what products we're going to put into that company, what their challenges are at that company, all the market data research that needs to go into that, I'm not your guy. It's interesting. I've been binge watching lately. I got through the series. How many people have ever watched the series House of Lies?
Oh, it's on my list.
It's on your list? Okay.
On my list.
Anybody raising their hand, they can raise their hand. I can't see it because I'm on my phone, but any hand raise?
Let's see. Any hands?
So the role that Don, they're consultants, right? And there's 4 people on this team. They call it a pod. It's Don Cheadle, Kristen Bell, and 2 other people. I don't remember their names, but they're really good actors. And there's one guy in there, Doug, who's the detail guy. They said, Doug, you need to dig up all this stuff. You need to give me. Now, Don Cheadle never does this. He's the key. He's the lead consultant. He's the guy who runs the practice, the partner level person. So he's the one who's, pressing the flesh, who is presenting the pitches and doing all that. He's not the detail guy. They get Doug to be the detail guy. But Doug is awkward, and he's not the guy who's going to go out and engage clients. In fact, he's more the guy who's probably going to, like they tell him in meetings, shut up, Doug, don't talk, Right. So you have to figure out what position you're going to play. It's like a football team, right? A quarterback probably should not be, a defensive lineman, right? In most cases. So figure out your position, figure out where you can play really, really well, better than most people, and then figure out what your weaknesses are and tell people about it. And if somebody says, listen, I need detail in this job, say, then I'm not your guy. But I'd love to talk to your company about other roles because I think I can help you grow your business.
Oh, that's great. That's a great answer. We have about 3 minutes left. And another question came in from Santosh. He asked, I joined a company after 16 years with one organization. After 8 weeks, we both decided to move on as the role was not what the company needed. Should I mention this on my resume and LinkedIn, or should it be a topic of conversation during the interview? Would that be a sign of weakness?
So it's interesting. It's so short, I probably wouldn't put it, and there's going to be people that disagree with me, and there's more than one answer on this, but I'm going to give you my answer. My advice would be don't put it on your LinkedIn and don't put it on your resume, but do talk about it and say, hey, one thing you're not going to see on my resume, and I made a judgment call. It was only 8 weeks. I determined it wasn't going to be the right fit for me. And so I moved on. I didn't want to spend more time at a company that I wasn't going to be adding the value I wanted to add, and they weren't going to be taking my career in the direction that I hoped they would. So we just parted ways. And so, I call that a foul ball. And I guarantee you guys, so many people have had foul balls in their career. So many people. Most of them don't put it on their resumes, but bring it up. Make sure it's not something that they have to find out on their own, because then they're going to be wondering, what else are you lying about? What else don't you know? You might even, I've seen this, Kristen, I don't know if you've seen this, but in Santosh, I don't know how many years of work experience you have, but a lot of people are putting in the last 15 to 20 years experience. So let's say you've been working like me. I've been working since 1987. That's when I had my first job. So that's almost, 34 years. God, I'm old. And so a lot of people that have been working to the 80s, they might put in jobs going all the way back to like 99 or 2000, something like that. And then they might put down other roles, prior roles. You could even put it in a category there, so it's on your resume, and you can even put the date next to it too. So it comes off of the main detail of your resume, but it goes into this like footnote section, right? And you mention it, and so that way somebody down the line doesn't feel like you're lying. But 8 weeks is so darn short. Anything less than 90 days, I just say it's a foul ball. We're all allowed foul balls.
Absolutely. And like you said, you kind of did yourself a service knowing that, okay, at 8 weeks, not a place for me, let's just call it as it is. Let's see. So we are at the 30-minute mark here. We are we are wrapping it up. Any last words you want to say before we head on out?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I apologize, guys, about the crappy internet, and I promise next week I'll be back in my home and we'll be doing this right. Thank you all for joining us today. Do send in your questions ahead of time because we want to address them. And I will share this. Everybody that you're interviewing with has been in your position at one point, and every single one of them has their own weaknesses. Just be transparent, be yourself, talk about, the things that have tripped you up in the past. Talk about if you've gotten fired from a job, right? And what you've learned about it, and talk about how you're willing to be very transparent to take risk out of this hire that they're going to make. They're going to know who they're getting up front, but you want them to take a chance on you because you feel like you've learned enough about yourself to know what the ideal roles are, and you're positioning yourself as such. And you're also mitigating some of those weaknesses through coaching or through other things that you've done. But let's all be transparent out there. Let's not, pump ourselves up as people that can, walk on water and turn, sand into gold and all these other things. We're just normal people, and so are the people you're interviewing with.
Absolutely. That's a great point. What a great note to end off on. But everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Rod. Thank you for your time. Join us next week on our next video session on the topic, the most effective way to reach out to a company. Send in all your questions to me. That's farandfort@mbexec.com, and we will answer them next Monday. And have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks, Kristen. Thanks for doing
Rod.
this.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.